Welcome back to another episode of Before You Buy, the show where we give you some straight-up gameplay and our first impressions of the latest games releasing. 14 years and 2 console generations later, PC players are finally, at long last, getting Rockstar's original classic. We got it ported to all the major consoles last year, and finally, it's available on all platforms. It's shocking that it's taken this long, but hey, better late than never, right? Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, let's talk Red Dead Redemption PC. So the ways of Rockstar are a mystery to me, and, well, to all. In particularly because, after all this time, this is just a bare-bones port. It's better than the initial console re-releases that came out locked at 30 FPS, but don't go into this one expecting some kind of remake, like the long-rumored Red Dead 1 in Red Dead 2 game. This is the original version from 14 years ago with higher resolution, and that's about it. It is pretty much in every way the Red Dead Redemption from 2010, which is maybe a little disappointing, but I mean, after the definitive editions of GTA and how that went, I'm glad it's not that. I would rather take a game that looks dated over a botched attempt to update it, and that's exactly what this is. It's a game that looks dated. It's nothing fancy, but hey, it works. Now, does that mean it is worth the $50 asking price? No. No, not at all. It is a solid port that is, in my experience, mostly bug-free, but that is an absurd asking price. I'm not gonna lie, as somebody who has played the original Red Dead to death over the years, and I'm not joking, I will do it again after having done this review, doing it, and I mean like, not eventually, I mean I will do it again within the next month. I love Red Dead Redemption. It is such a good game. And now I can play it at 144 FPS, which I like. This port comes to us by way of Double 11, who I haven't really heard of, per se, but they're actually not some fly-by-night company. These guys have been around for a while. They've made a few actual games, but their specialty these games seems to be porting games to new platforms, and that's what this is. It's like if Red Dead got a really good PC port back in 2010. I mean, all things considered, these days it's still quite a solid port job. It does have a pretty decent selection of graphics options on the menu, even if there's no unlocked frame rate. There is DLSS, though, which is kind of overkill for such an outdated-looking game, but I'm not going to complain about that. The thing about Red Dead 1 is it might look quaint to modern eyes, but back when it came out, it was absolutely revolutionary. I cannot undersell how big of an impact this made on a gaming world. It really blew all the other open world games at the time out of the water with its detailed graphics and highly authentic world. The fact Rockstar would come along and put out a sequel that was 10 times more immersive than this game doesn't diminish the fact that this was really a big step up for Rockstar. Like, GTA 4 was Rockstar dipping their toes in it, but Red Dead is full prestige. Like, seriously. It's a serious game. It has some funny moments, not gonna lie, but for the most part, it is a Western played pretty straight. Like, it's less spaghetti Western and more of a revisionist Western, like The Unforgiven or 310 to Yuma, or the Coen's version of True Grit, which actually came out the same year, and I went to see, and I remember thinking very much this exact same thought. The violence is unflinching, and the West is depicted as a sinister and cutthroat place. It almost feels pointless to summarize the plot, but hell, it's been so long that there are going to be people who've never played this game, so here. You play as John Marston. He's an old outlaw on a mission to hunt down and bring down the old members of his gang, dead or alive, because, you know, the FBI has his family hostage, basically. I mean, they're not called the FBI, but they're the FBI, and also, they're jerks. Anyway, the premise is pretty simple. It's straightforward. Gotta hunt down the old members of the gang, right? Presentation, uniformly excellent, particularly for a game as old as this one. PS3, Xbox 360 era presentation isn't reliably great. I mean, there's plenty of great examples from the era, but it wasn't a given, let's say. And Red Dead just absolutely excels. John Marston is a fan favorite for a reason. He's tough, but soft-spoken. He's an outlaw with some decency to him. And he's existential without being a blowhard. And it's the last one that's really hard to do, it seems like. I mean, we have so many examples of characters waxing poetic about the nature of existence. And it ain't done well. But old John is. His journey takes him through the fictional state of New Austin, down to Mexico, which is embroiled in a civil war. And then the game's most surreal turn, you end up outside the booming city center of Blackwater, where you're confronted with the changing times. Honestly, the end of the Old West is just such a great era for stories. You show up to town and there's cars and machine guns. It's a total culture shock that hammers the point of how old the Old West really was and how quickly it was being swept away. It's a game with themes, man. and it actually asks some difficult questions about our place in a changing world and the possibility of forgiveness and moving on. Needless to say, there's plenty to chew on by the end of this game. And it's legitimately hard not to get emotional when the credits finally roll. I mean, to be fair, these days I'm light to the touch and get verklempt pretty easily. I guess that's what happens when you get old and everything starts getting all nostalgic and shit. Oh, it's you, sentimentality. I thought we'd never be friends, and yet here we are. See? Being existential without becoming a blowhard is difficult. But, even so, back in the day, I was not as sentimental, and I definitely did not think, oh, I'll play a Rockstar game, and that will bring me to tears. Not to say the story is without flaw, of course that's not true. John spends a lot of time getting bossed around by dickheads, and that's of course a Rockstar staple, but it stands out here, probably in particular just because of everything I just said about the story, but also that there's really nothing stopping John from just putting a hole in the heads of these idiots and moving on. Again, I'll say this, it's the Wild West. It might be near the end of the Wild West, but it is the Wild West. Nowadays, you can't sneeze without it becoming quote-unquote data. But back then, people were killing each other and getting away with it. And they did it for several more decades. I mean, to be fair, we wouldn't have a game if he just killed all the bad guys immediately. So, obviously, that's why he doesn't. But it should also be noted that the level of performances from everybody involved really props up the material here. There are some incredible monologues sprinkled into the story that, without the performance, don't necessarily serve a purpose, but they really create this atmosphere, this downbeat atmosphere. The music also absolutely fantastic. Even though it's not going for that big bombastic Western sound all the time, it's great. It's pretty underplayed and atmospheric generally, but it's done very well, and when they whip out the trumpets for the big moments, it's very effective. If there is one thing I will complain about regarding the sound, it's that the quality of the dialogue can be spotty sometimes, and it's a lot more noticeable in this port. And I don't mean the performances, I mean the literal audio quality is pretty bad. Obviously, they compress the old audio to get it onto a disc, but it stands out, and not in a good way. It makes me wonder, it's probably a good case for, using one of those AI voice modelers to, create models of the voices of the characters and run the old dialogue through it. It would probably be tedious, but man, it would definitely help. It would still be the original performances, too, which would be, I think, ideal. And maybe someday they'll do that and patch it in, I don't know. It's not something I'm going to complain about too hard. Visually, it's 14 years old. What do you want me to tell you? Stuff the game wants us to focus on, like the main characters, look pretty solid for the era. The lighting and general composition of some of these cutscenes remains excellent. It's cinematic, and the people who worked on this clearly have cinematic skills. And while it's not everything, some things still look very good. I'd say the horses look better than a lot of horses we see in games today. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Other parts do stand out, like low-resolution textures. Get a close-up of John, you can practically count the bits in that texture. A lot of background textures are barely there. They're kind of vague smudges. This port hasn't done anything to clean any of that up. Not even the loading screens, which are exactly the same resolution they used to be. But if you install this game on an SSD, you're only going to see them for a split second. Speaking of the visuals, they're the only parts of the game I ever experienced any real bugs playing this game on PC. Once in a great while, a character stutters in place or the animation would seem kind of messed up. Like this bartender at this saloon, look, it's noticeable. And I don't remember this bug from the original game. I play a lot of old PC games on PC, and one of those common issues you get when you port old games to modern PC environments, it's the frame rate. Sometimes old games start running at a frame rate way higher than they were originally built to do, and it leads to weirdness. I played this game at 144 FPS, and I noticed weird little moments where characters would speed up or animate in a choppy way. It reminds me of other games with these same kinds of issues. I'm not sure what it is. It's not like the original Red Dead was entirely bug-free. It had its fair share of issues when it originally came out, so I might be misremembering this particular problem. Either way, it's the only real issue I experienced, and it's pretty damn minor. There wasn't even any stuttering. Of course there wasn't. This game is old as hell, but my expectations on PC ports, it still got that residual expectation of stuttering from the last few years. So everything else is pretty solid, but how does the gameplay hold up? And I think it's probably a duh on this one. Pretty well. If you're coming from Red Dead 2, it might be a little jarring because of how quick and responsive this game is in comparison. RDR 1 is a lot more of a regular game compared to the crazy ambition of the sequel. Everything's simpler and gamier than the second game. And I'm not going to make any kind of value judgment here. I love both games, but they play pretty differently. For my money, I'm more likely to go back to RDR 1, particularly now that I can play it on PC. So maybe that means I think it's better, but I don't know. Because honestly, when I play RDR 2, I always marvel at a lot of things about it. This isn't a comparison between those games anyway, so I mean the basics remain the same. You ride a horse, you get in gunfights, you explore the open world, which is actually surprisingly small. They do a really good job giving the impression of a grand western landscape, but getting around doesn't take that long. Missions are varied, and it actually takes a while to get into a proper shootout, but for me at least, the shooting really holds up. Yes, it's your usual cover shooter stuff from this era, but the euphoria physics really make every bullet impact feel powerful. This game is still my favorite implementation of that technology they've ever done, and it's just perfect for a gritty western like this. Not every mission is a winner. There's some annoying ones, some busy work. Also, herding cattle is... I do appreciate there's some actual cowboy stuff in the game, but the mechanics from these segments are still, very frustrating, regardless. In general, though, it's a much more fast-paced and focused game than Red Dead 2. John has his mission, and he mostly sticks to it. And when you go on, a tangent, because you do go on some, it still serves the ultimate goal of hunting down his former friends. In comparison to the massiveness of the sequel, this game's way more manageable in length. It's about 18 hours long if you're just playing through the story. Again, no judgment here, just saying it's quicker, and it's probably the reason I played through this one multiple times and will continue to do so, even though I don't necessarily do it with the sequel. I mean, it's not like I'm never going to play the sequel again, but I'm way more likely to come back to this one. I already said that. There's still a lot of side games and optional events, just not as many as the second game. In general, the world isn't as immersive as that game. Stores are basically menus, there's no complicated confrontation system, and the little shows you can see are a lot more basic than what they managed to do in the second game, but it all has a charm to it. It's still fun to stop and play a game of Five Finger Filet or Texas Hold'em, and the bounty missions are a fun side activity. Lassoing guys, hog tying them, throwing them on the back of the horse, it's always satisfying. There's still strangers who want your help in this game too, and for the most part, it's still completely inexplicable why John decides to help these people. But hey, they're usually pretty quick asides. They want you to collect 20 flowers or something like that. It's less of a simulation overall. Your health automatically regenerates, so you don't worry about eating. The Deadeye meter is the same, just regenerates on its own. You never really have to worry about your horse. It's basically a car with 4 legs. All these things make for a much more playable, straightforward game with a focus on the story. But if you really love the immersive stuff from the sequel, it's apples to oranges. This is not the same thing. They're not doing the same things. Red Dead Redemption is an all-time classic, but on PC in particular, it's living in the shadow of its sequel. The second game is just grander, it's more ambitious. It still looks incredibly good. The original is definitely showing its age on the other hand, but to its credit, it still looks pretty damn good at times. For an open world game that's as old as this one, it manages to surprise me sometimes. I do have to say that. The gameplay really holds up for me personally. All this cover shooting might come off as dated to some people coming to it now, but for me, it feels great to play, and the missions are varied and interesting enough that it works. It works very well. Also, I just like the cover shooting stuff. I don't know if that's everybody's thing still, but I like the gaminess, I like the simplicity. But also, it's one of Rockstar's tightest scripts. It easily holds up among the best of the Rockstar, if not better than all of the other Rockstar games. And one thing that surprises me when you go back to the game is just how much foreshadowing they do in the opening hours. They reference characters and locations that don't even come into play until the end of the game. And man, if that ending isn't one of the best Rockstar conclusions, if not the best. I honestly, I think it's probably their best, and maybe one of the best video game endings of all time, period. There are some annoying missions to get through, but it's worth seeing it to the end. The port is bare bones, but it's solid, and personally, unless we're getting a full-blown remaster, I kind of prefer this approach to updating a game. It's pretty much how I remembered it, both good and bad. There aren't a lot of new problems, and the graphics options are nice. There weren't a lot of weird issues with it running on my PC or anything, although I run a good PC. Not the best, quite good though. And I've gushed and will continue to gush about this port. Probably one of the best PC ports I've played in a while, but a big hell no on the $50 price tag. It's mostly an unchanged port of a game old enough to be in high school. And at least with the console versions, you get a physical box to somewhat justify the price, or at least you can get it. You can't do that here. You get it on Steam. So I'm going to recommend wait on it a little. It's going to get marked down at some point. Buy it when it does. I mean, I don't think you'll regret it if you get this at like even $30. I mean, that might be a bit steep, but this is really a hell of a game. I mean, it's already been this long, so what's, however long it takes them to go to 50% off, right? That's my opinion. What do you think? Leave us a comment. Let us know. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications, and as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time right here on gameranx.